So I played in the Pauper Super Qualifier on November 9th. However, I had a prior obligation in the evening, and this was going to go at least 9 rounds, and if I made it to top 8, another 3 rounds. So I knew I was not going to be able to actually play the full event when I started. I had time for about 5 or what ended up 6 rounds, and so I played 6 rounds of the event. I just recorded my screen without commentary, but I ended up having some decent games, and 6 matches, I mean, that's more than a league. I figured I'd just give you the rundown here and add some more Black Sack content to the channel. Otherwise, I was just throwing the footage in the graveyard and didn't figure I needed to waste it. So I'm playing my stock list, of course. That is with the 2 snuff outs that I added pretty recently. Otherwise, your pretty standard Black Sack list: 17 lands, 14 growers, these 12, as well as 2 sadistic glees, 14 fodder creatures, these normal 12 plus 2 shambling ghasts, some interaction, some card draw, right of consumption to win the game, and some recursion. And our sideboard looks like this. So jumping into match 1 here, we have a decent opening hand, not the best thing ever. We have Feeder plus Beetle, which is of course probably my favorite combination in the game. We start with no fodder, which could be very detrimental. I don't necessarily think this is a very good hand. To be honest, I think I should have mulliganed this. 3 lands is essentially already a dead card. 2 lands is really all you need to win a game of Black Sack, in my opinion. That's kind of the ideal to start with, and often if the game ends within the first 4 turns, you don't need more than that. Snuff Out could be really good depending on what we're up against, and I don't mind a right of consumption. It's nice to know that we have that as an out later. But currently we don't have the best creatures to actually grow here. So I think I actually should have mulliganed this hand, to be honest. But we kept it. So we start with the Mortician Beetle. We're on the play, so Beetle could die right away. Feeder's a little bit more important, depending on what we're up against. If we're up against red or something like that, that's going to kill the Beetle. And it looks like Caw Gates, so honestly a pretty decent matchup for us in general. But that's partially because we have fodder to chump block their life gainers. We can get a lot of damage quickly. And we top deck a land, so we don't have anything to chump block with, and we don't have a lot of damage quickly, so this is also one where Snuff Out is a little bit less powerful. Right of Consumption can get blocked by counter spells and Prismatic Strands, so definitely could be kind of a rough one, and we top deck a Carrion Feeder. Better than another Swamp, but not quite the fodder that we were looking for. That said, it feels like we got to get some damage going, so I still end up sacrificing it to grow the creatures. We hit for 4. And they have a Squadron Hawk here. So maybe gonna have some chump blockers. If we're lucky, we'll top deck probably just like a double body creature, so we can make these as big as possible. A Village Rites in general in this type of situation could be good, except for the fact that we don't actually have anything we want to sacrifice to a Village Rites. So not quite what I'm looking for. They hit for 1 and gain some life. Not really worth snuffing out yet. I'd rather save this to snuff out a creature before it could flash back a Prismatic Strands, or snuff out a creature that are going to Basilisk Gate up. We do get the Link Breaker, so maybe we can make something happen. We can sacrifice it twice if we want to be really aggressive and hit for 8 here. They end up blocking, so we're not even going to get that much damage. I think we want to keep one of our fodder creatures around in case we top deck a Village Rites. It might have even been better to not sack at all, because then if we top deck a Supernatural Stamina, we have something to use it on, whereas now we don't really have that. They do have a Journey to Nowhere. That's a bit unfortunate. They're going to take out our Feeder. This deck doesn't have any way to recur the Journey to Nowhere, so we 100% should just sacrifice the Feeder to grow the Beetle, and also in case we get an Unearth, we can bring it back later. Against an opponent that has like Core Skyfishers, like a Boros or something that might be playing Journey to Nowhere, there's some thought to go into whether you should sack the creature, because they could pick up the Journey again, but here it's probably not a big concern. They play another Hawk and pass, so we have 1 4/4. They do have a Basilisk Gate, but we have a Snuff Out for it. We get another Beetle. I mean, if we had gotten another Carrion Feeder, we could... Assuming they don't block with a Hawk, we could potentially put up lethal here. I think they're definitely going to block, but like theoretically, if we got the Feeder, we could pump with the Mercenary, double sack, make a 7 power Beetle, and then throw it with the Right of Consumption, but that's not going to work out. They embalm the Sacred Cat and play another Hawk. They cast the last Hawk and attack for 1, and we top deck a Swamp. Definitely looking tough. I can't really attack with this Beetle. The small one, that is. I can attack with the big one, which I will. I'm sure it will just warrant a block, keeping their life total high. They're going to pump the Sacred Cat. We have the Snuff Out for it. And they swing with that and a Hawk. I'm going to pay 4 life to Snuff Out rather than the hard cast, because if they have a Spell Pierce, I really don't want this to get Spell Pierced. That would be quite unfortunate to pay the 4 mana and then get a Spell Pierce. They just have the counter spell, so it doesn't really matter either way. They gain 7 life. We're probably just going to lose here, but I'd like to see what my top card is, because maybe if it's a vampire or something, we could get there. And it's a supernatural stamina. That's not going to do it. We have no way to interact with the cat. They can gain at least another 7 life, and we're just not going to be able to win this one, unfortunately. So we go to sideboarding, bring in Rotten Reunion, Nihil Spellbomb to get rid of cats, Prismatic Strands, Deep Analysis, and a few Mesmeric Fiends. Take out the Rite of Consumption because they get got by the counter spells and the strands. Curse Marauder and Snuff Out don't do as much as we want them to. And here we have an okay hand. We have a Mesmeric Fiend with a Bloodthorn Vampire. We have Unearth and double stamina, so we can really hammer their hand with the Fiend. It's not an amazing hand by any means, but I think it's keepable. As long as the Vampire sticks around, we'll be okay. If they do have a Journey to Nowhere for it, we can still sack it to itself and unearth it, so it's not the riskiest ever. Like, it's not so fragile that if the Vampire dies right away, we're done, but definitely hinders on the Vampire surviving quite a bit. Linkbreaker is a nice draw. We're still just going to put the Vampire down so we can Fiend next turn. If there's no interaction on the Vampire here, then we can Fiend next turn. And the following turn we could Unearth and Linkbreaker, hit for a bunch. If we get a Swamp, maybe even Stamina in there as well. They do just have the Journey to Nowhere. Obviously, we'll sack the Vampire to itself. And we do get a Swamp, so I could still unearth the Vampire and go for a Fiend here. I definitely got to get the Vampire back on the field, and my only alternative is play Linkbreaker and like Stamina it, but I really want to make sure there's no second Journey to kill our Vampire, so we're going to do that. This, of course, means the Staminas aren't going to be able to be used on the Fiend, but if I could just use them on the Linkbreaker, that could be pretty decent. I take the Cat away because I think it's the main way for them to interact here. The Thraben Charm isn't going to kill our Vampire if they don't have a creature. And after we have a Linkbreaker on the board, it shouldn't be able to kill our Vampire at all. They have a Lorien Revealed I don't care about, and they have a Brainstorm. So Cat, I think, is a nice hit, being able to take away both halves of it. They play a Seagate and pass. They don't even have colored mana up, so I can be free to do whatever I want here. We do get a Swamp, not very good, so I can't deal lethal damage here. I could save these staminas for maybe next turn if I get like a Rite of Consumption, although I pulled that out, so that's not going to happen. I think it makes sense to just cash these in right now. We get as many creatures as we can. We can start attacking with a little army here. So I'm even going to use the second one. Maybe I save the second in case we get a Nested Shambler. But again, it just feels like I kind of got to use the cards that I have right now. And I think this is the best way to do that. I even decide to sack the Linkbreaker to get in for a little bit more damage. This means we have just all mercenaries. So if I do get a Nested Shambler, I can still get 4 squirrels off of it. And I think that seems pretty good to me. They cycle a Lorien Revealed for an island, and then Brainstorm here. They play a Seagate. So we actually know they have an island in hand that I closed for some reason, and we know they have a Citadel Gate in hand now because they haven't played that yet. So we know 2 of their 4 cards. They Squadron Hawk, so they're going to now have 7 cards, 5 of which we know. And the Hawk is annoying. That means I'm not going to be able to deal lethal damage pretty much no matter what I draw. A Shambling Guest could pick off the Hawk, but wouldn't be quite enough damage to put it over the finish line. I used all of the mercenaries to pump the Vampire here, and then I attacked. This didn't quite make sense. I'm clearly going to have to... They're going to block, and I'm going to have to sack a mercenary anyway, so I should have just attacked with all the mercenaries. Then if they block, I'm still losing a mercenary, trading for the Hawk, and I could have gotten in for 3 damage or something. Maybe they still block the Vampire, but then I get in for 2 damage. So that was a waste of a couple damage. Obviously, if they didn't block, then I could have gotten in for more damage that way, without losing any mercenaries, but just the chances of them blocking were almost 100%. They Brainstorm and then play another Hawk, so they get to pull out a couple extra and pass the turn. They have a Thraben Charm up here. We just get another Vampire. Really not what we're looking for, and I'm still just pumping the Vampires with the mercenaries. I do pump them the 2 separate ones, which is the correct way to do this, because then if they block one, I'm getting in with more damage with the other. This might actually make some more sense because now I have 2 Vampires. They can only block 1 theoretically, so I could pump the other one that they don't block. They decide to take the damage though, and if I had sacrificed all of the other 3 creatures, I would have only gotten in for enough to put them to 3. I don't see any reason to sack a bunch of creatures when they're not going to actually die, so we just let it go. And they cycle another Lorien Revealed for an island. They play a Hawk and pass, so down to 1 in hand. Now they have Prismatic Strands up, so that's something else I have to worry about. We just get a Swamp. So I can attack with the team, but it gets a little problematic because then they block 2 Vampires. I have to sack 2 mercenaries to keep them alive, or 1 of the Vampires to keep them alive. And then they Prismatic Strands, and I actually don't make much progress except losing creatures for it, so I don't think it makes sense to sack anything here. especially when we're kind of low on fodder. They play the last hawk. Now they have a Thraben Charm that deals 6 damage, so I can also throw a bit of a wrench in the works. Sadistically is honestly not a bad draw in general, because we can put that on a mercenary token. It makes it harder for their prismatic strands to blank all of our creatures, because now we have red creatures growing and black creatures growing. However, we don't have the fodder right now to actually make that a creature that can grow big enough to survive like a Thraben Charm. So it feels like kind of a waste to just throw that out there. We're going to hold it. We also have plenty of mana. And they're going to Thraben Charm a vampire at the end step. I had to have to sacrifice 3 creatures to keep it alive, so there's no reason to do that, especially when at least one of those creatures that we'd have to sacrifice would be another vampire. They play a gate and actually go on the offensive, attacking for 2 here, and they play a cap. I gotta be honest, this one's just looking real rough. We draw a swamp. I'm not really seeing a way out at this point, so we just go ahead and scoop it up. They have enough cards in hand. I'm very confident they probably have a prismatic strands, maybe a counterspell. We didn't have the board presence to put up the pressure we want. That's a match where we specifically want to have Carrion Feeder plus Beetle, which is what we had in game 1. However, we didn't have the fodder to support it, so I don't really like how I played that match. Obviously, I pointed out some issues with it, but especially the keep in game 1 was very loose. And so I think it's probably justice that we lost that one because didn't play it super great. You can now pick up my comprehensive guide to Esper Cryo Affinity, including 38 sideboard matchups, and I just put out a big update for my Black Sack guide, including a slightly different deck list. I began offering coaching sessions if you're interested in taking your Pauper game to the next level, and I'm accepting deck donations, so if you desperately want me to play a deck that I usually wouldn't play, something like Elves, then you can make me do that for a small fee. I've started posting a League video every single day, not to mention streaming at least a couple times a week on Twitch, but I'm not going to be able to keep that up forever unless I can get a little bit more help from the community. Any of the ways I've just mentioned are great ways to help me out, or you can even subscribe and support me on a monthly basis. Round 2 here, though, we get a pretty reasonable opening hand. Double Carrion Feeder and Vampire is definitely more sack creatures than we want, but Marauder can interact nicely, and a Nested Shambler to pump them is not bad. Of course, a Beetle would probably be one of our best draws. Sadistically acts very much like a Beetle, so that's actually not a bad draw either. Deciding between playing a Carrion Feeder, which we don't mind throwing out here because if it gets bolted, we have plenty of backups, or a Shambler, which could block with the Epicure, but I kind of want to save the Shambler to get Sadistic Glee on it. So I decided to cast the Shambler after all because I don't think they're going to target it with any of their removal, and I'm not going to block here, but I could have thrown out the Feeder and had that as a bit of a lightning rod. They end up playing an Epicure and a Tomb Raider, so it looks like Red Rally here, as opposed to Madness Burn. We take the damage, we get a swamp, and now we're going to play a Feeder, and I actually end up putting the Glee on the Feeder so that it can grow outside of the damage threshold. And this is because I just don't really have the fodder, actually, to make the Shambler survive. If I just put the Glee on here and I had a Carrion Feeder out, I could sacrifice the Feeder to itself to grow the Shambler, and if I then also block an Epicure, that'll die. Like, that wouldn't be terrible. But I also figure with this Marauder, which can clear 1 blocker and grow the Carrion Feeder, maybe we can race them pretty decently. They do have a Burning Tree Emissary here, so could be bad, but Ren's Resolve's not as bad as a Rally. I'm sure I'll check what they exiled with the Ren's Resolve at some point, but apparently I didn't do that right away. They swing with the team, but now I can definitely feel free to block with the Shambler, and blocking here allows me to get 2 counters on the Feeder from trading off, which is exactly what we do. We also end up with the Squirrel, and then we top deck a Supernatural Stamina. Now obviously that would have been great with the Shambler, but it's not too bad with the Accursed Marauder either. I can play that, Stamina it, sack it twice, so they lose 2 of their creatures. They'll keep the Burning Tree Emissary, but that's going to grow our Carrion Feeder 4 times, so then I can attack with a 7/7. They have a 2/2, and we're still at 12 life, so not a bad position at all. Assuming they can't fill the board with more creatures, I think this is a real nice way to cut off a lot of their damage. So sack those twice, we get a 7/7, attack in, and put them to 13. They get a Clockwork Percussionist and Galvanic Blast from exile. Now that they have the Percussionist, that deals 4. They attack with a Burning Tree, we go to 6, but I decided to block. It makes sense. Actually, I want to stay a little bit higher on life total, and this grows the Feeder. So it's a 9/9 because we sacked it and the Glee grew it. And they're at 13. And we top deck the perfect card. Shambling Ghast can pick off the Percussionist. That's going to grow the Feeder twice. Then we play one of our other creatures, sacrifice it, grow it twice more, and we can hit for 13 for a nice turn 4 win. For our sideboard, we bring in a little bit of life gain with Life Staff, Drown in Sorrow, and Spinning Darkness, Drown in Sorrow to wipe the board. Take out the Snuff Outs, the Accursed Marauders, even though they worked pretty well there, they're not the best in general, and an Unearth. Since we cut the Marauders, I usually like to cut an Unearth. Here we have Drown in Sorrow, double life staff, but obviously no lands. We got to mulligan that. But this hand looks pretty good anyway. Carrion Feeder and Beetle. Shamblagast Village Rites. Looks real good. Tough to figure out what to get rid of. Probably got to be Card Draw or the Darkness. And I decided to put back the Darkness. It's really good card, obviously, but single target removal isn't really what we want in this match. I obviously brought it in because it's good enough for free and gaining 3 life to play, but it's not as necessary, I think, as the other cards in our hand. They do have the perfect turn 1 of Tomb Raider with Great Furnace. We get a Swamp, which honestly, as long as we don't draw too many more, isn't terrible with this Village Rites. Playing the Ghast is the most protected. It also can trade with a Tomb Raider if I really want to do that. They play a Synth into a Synth, which is always a great sign because then they get and the Festivities, which stays in exile. And since we have this Village Rites and everything, I decide I'm not going to trade the Tomb Raider here. And we get another Swamp. That's where things are starting to look problematic. I play the Carrion Feeder and I play the Beetle, and I just pass. Obviously, either of these gets bolted down, but the alternative was leave one of them in hand and have a Village Rites up. I think I'd rather just get them both on the field, try to start developing them, and ideally if they go for a bunch of creatures here, ours will survive. And they do play a Burning Tree into a Tomb Raider, swing with the Tomb Raiders. And I gotta make the decision, do I want to trade off the Ghast for one of them again? And I decide no. 12 is still a relatively healthy life total. I really need this Village Rites to find us something, of course. Find another Swamp. So now I could chump with the Ghast, but I really want to have some creatures this turn. If I find something, this means the Carrion Feeder can start attacking, maybe race like last time, and also the Beetle will get big enough to actually block. Oof, and we just get a Stamina and another Swamp. Really not what we're wanting at all. But I'll attack with the Feeder, and if they go for a block, I can Stamina to trade, which is not the end of the world. They don't have a bolt or anything, it appears. I'll take that trade. We do need to survive a little bit longer. They crack a Synth, which is a good sign that they don't have a lot going on. They have a mountain that they get off the top, pass with the team, and I decide I really need to not take 2 damage from each of these every single turn, so I'm going to block with the Beetle, sack the Feeder to itself to grow the Beetle. That eats a 2/2 and makes other attacks pretty hard next turn if they don't get anything here. We get a Shambler, which is a nice little card. Obviously not doing too much right now. They crack another Synth for a Lightning Bolt. So that can take out the Beetle, which it does. And I have a couple options here. I could take it, because maybe if I draw Supernatural Stamina, that's decent, or even just a vampire or whatever. I could also block, hoping that we get a Drown in Sorrow, so we save 2 life. We do end up getting the vampire, so it's probably better that we kept it around, but they have to have just about nothing. We can block, eat one of their guys, maybe then we get the Drown in Sorrow, wipe their board, and can start attacking. They're definitely getting flooded. So here we get to trade a Shambler for a Samurai and take 2 damage. And in response, they're going to cast into the fire the Squirrel and the Vampire. That just kills the Squirrel because the Vampire can still be big enough unless they have like another bolt, but reasonable for them to do. And Infestation Sage, that's another blocker that lets us eat a Samurai. Not terrible. They get a Clockwork Percussionist and swing. We get to block here, take a damage, trade for the Samurai. Another Sage off the top isn't bad. We know their cards in hand can't be Lightning Bolts because we'd already be dead, so maybe we can claw back from this. Another Tomb Raider, that's why we left back the Insect. We have blockers for everybody. Of course, the Percussionist draws a card if we block it, and I think all I'm waiting for is a Life Staff. If I can top deck a Life Staff, then I can actually come back from the brink here. So by blocking, I would actually give them, I would speed up their drawing of like a Lightning Bolt or something that could kill us, and I just want to get to a Life Staff. I think that's the only way I can survive here. So I'm actually going to take the one off the Percussionist, because also the difference between 3 and 2 is almost negligible. I guess a Galvanic Blast without Metalcraft would do it. We find another Vampire, and at this point, we're pretty much dead to a rally. I mean, if I leave everything back, I'm not dead to a rally, but like most things they can have are already pretty bad, so I decide to attack for 1. This still doesn't leave us dead to a rally, technically, but you know, we're taking 1. We might be taking 1 from the Percussionist regardless. And so we're doing the same thing. I'm going to block and sack off the Insect. So we don't take any damage, but we also don't give them that card draw. And I top deck the Life Staff. It's a little late, but we could still come back from this. Throw that on the Insect, attack right away, or rather sacrifice right away. We know we're not dead here at 2 life because obviously they would have already killed us. So we need to go up to 5 right away. So their top decking a Lightning Bolt wouldn't kill us. Equip, we even get to attack, throw some damage at them. We're not going to be blocking this Percussionist now, so swing with both and hit for 5. And I could sack to the Life Staff right now, but it feels like they probably didn't have a bolt here, so should be okay if they just draw 1 card. They don't attack this time, and they play a Burning Tree Emissary. Pass the turn. We just get a Swamp. So not quite what we need. We're just going to pass. And they don't swing here. We draw sadistically. Not the best thing ever, but we can throw it on our vampire, maybe sack the other vampire to it, throw the life staff on the first one, but I decided to just sandbag it for now. Like I said, it just doesn't really do that much until we can actually get something else. And they chain lightning us now. We're at 5, so we go to 2. So if I let this happen and they have a bolt, then I can never sacrifice for the life staff again, because then they would just bolt us in response. So I'd have to find another way to gain life. So I think I have to sacrifice in response here so that we don't die to the chain lightning. So we're going to do that. Gain 3, and in response they bolt us down to 2 and galvanic blast us. At the time I was unsure how they even had this many cards in hand, but I was just counting it. They did have 3 turns after we'd gained the life staff, 3 draws, that apparently they went burn spell, burn spell, burn spell. So a bit unfortunate. Obviously, if we weren't drawing fodder there, we weren't going to stabilize anyway, but the life staff almost brought us back. Opponent mulligans here. We keep a decent hand. We have the Spinning Darkness that we get to keep this time. 3 lands. Shambler with Beetle and Feeder. They start with an Epic here. And we top deck a Shambling Ghast. I could play the Feeder and the Ghast, pick off the Epicure, or I could sack the Ghast to make a treasure, then play the Beetle. That way the Carrion Feeder would be a 4-4. The Beetle would still only be a 3-3, but I try to play it a little slow here, play these out. If they don't force us to sacrifice anything, then I can get a Beetle down, and then that can also be a 4-4, is my goal here. And they play a Tomb Raider and an Epicure, so nothing too scary for us. We want to preserve these until we have the Beetle down, so we're going to take 3, even though we definitely have some pretty favorable blocks. Not favorable, like we're killing their guys, but just, we don't mind jumping. But we get a Shambler, which is great. Play that in the Beetle. Now we have 2 potential 6/6s, which is totally fantastic. So I'm going to start with attacking with the Feeder. Can't block, so it might as well be attacking. And they take it. I'm just going to deal the 1. Every creature we sacrifice would be a chump block we don't get to make, especially with the Shamblers making tapped squirrels. I think it's really important to preserve those blockers sometimes. They have another Epicure and a Percussionist, so just a whole bunch of 1/1s. This time they don't attack. And I could sack a Shambler here to have an untapped squirrel on our turn. I decide against it, and we top deck a Beetle, which instantly makes me think I made the right play, because now every creature we sacrifice grows our Beetles. We have 5 fodder creatures to sacrifice, so that means these can all be 6/6s. So we just slam in with the Feeder, see if they want to chump block or just take another damage. Looks like they block with the Tomb Raider, so we're gonna have to sack a couple creatures to keep our guy alive. But then they just start piling the blocks on, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even consider this. But we can sacrifice our 3 fodder creatures and we'll have a Spinning Darkness. Take out their Tomb Raider. I even screenshot this, as you can see, because I realized that not only do we have the Spinning Darkness, so this is the moment before our opponent realized they effed up, but also with the Shambling Ghast on board, we actually don't even need to use the Spinning Darkness. I have 5 fodder to sack here, so this is a 6/6. Shambling Ghast can pick off an Epicure, and then they only have 5/5 power and toughness. So I don't even have to use the Spinning Darkness to just completely wreck them. And that's why I took the screenshot, because it felt like they really didn't know what they were doing there. I respect the quintuple block if on board it wasn't just obviously a bad block. And so we eat everything. No reason to even use the Spinning Darkness, so I will not. Eat every creature on board and be left behind with 3 6/6s. They exile a Synth, which they can cast at their leisure. And they do. They cast a Tomb Raider and pass the turn. And we get a Drought in Sorrow. If I got any piece of fodder, then I could deal them lethal here. But I don't even need it to just slam in for 18. I Spinning Darkness their creature just to kind of show them they're basically dead, although technically not if they want to wait another turn. But we can hit them for 18 here. We're at 17 life. Not sure how they're going to kill us in 1 turn, and we have a Drown in Sorrow even if they did somehow build up the board. A Galvanic Blast from Hell's Heart. They stab at thee for 4 damage. Cast a Percussionist and a Bushwhacker. And that's going to be round 2. Round 3 here we get paired up against Page from the Pauper format panel. And we get a just gorgeous opening hand. Shambler, Bloodthorn Vampire, Stamina. That right there can be a turn 3 win if we get a swamp off the top of our deck. No, I'm forgetting the Rite of Consumption we would need as well. Not a turn 3 win with just those. However, if we put the Sadistic Glee on the Vampire, that would be +3 power and toughness per creature we sacrifice. Shambler and Stamina, as we know, is 6 sacrifices. That means Vampire would become a 19/19. As long as we attack for 1 with the Shambler on turn 2 here, just the Sadistic Glee, Stamina, Vampire should be a turn 3 win, which I honestly even forgot at this moment. I was just thinking we needed a Rite of Consumption. She plays an Abundant Growth and a Utopia Sprawl, so looks like Bogles to me, especially with that on white, but 1 lander is going to be pretty tough. And we even top decked the second Sadistic Glee, which is when I realized that I absolutely definitely have lethal. Forgetting that I didn't even need the second Glee for it. This is well over enough damage. So we sacrifice everything to make a 25-25 vampire, and they scoop it up. Luckily, we saw enough to know that they're on Bogles, so we get to bring in a Cursed Marauder and Mesmeric Fiends and take out some of our targeted removal. And we get this hand that just doesn't have anything going for it. A lot of different fodder, which is kind of cool. But no interaction and no growers of our own. We need either interactive or fast. Here we get a hand that has Village Rites and Cursed Marauder, so quite a bit better than the last one. And the Flying from Infestation Sage, we decide isn't super relevant. That could be proved to be not true with a Silana Ledgewalker, but we decide to keep the Link Breakers for a potential Nested Shambler after all. They play a Scout and a Standard Bearer, so that actually means that, smartly, we're not going to be able to Curse Marauder away one of these creatures. The Scout, that is. And I took out most of my targeted removal. So I play the Bloodthrone Vampire here. All I need to get is a Swamp, and I can go a Cursed Marauder and Unearth. And I figure if I just throw out the Marauder, it eats the Standard Bearer. Then if they get another creature, they put that down knowing that the Marauder might be unearthed or there might be another Marauder. And so I kind of wanted it to be more of a surprise. So if we top deck a Swamp here, then I can just double kill their creatures. And the Vampire can be a decent blocker and stuff. But Ancestral Mask makes that not the case, plus Rancor. So Trample, it's a 9/7, so I can't block profitably with the Vampire. So we got to take a hit for 9 damage. We top deck a Carrion Feeder. Now things are looking bad. If they have like another Ancestral Mask or something, we're just going to die, and I don't have the ability to Curse Marauder and Unearth in the same turn here. So now I decide I just need to Marauder and hope for the best, hope there's no other enchantment, and then Unearth next turn. But she's got a Utopia Sprawl, which grows the mask, and another mask to make it a 23 power creature, and I just die. Now that's every card in their hand, so no additional creatures, which means if I had just played the Accursed Marauder on turn 2, killed one of their creatures and then Unearthed, I would have won this game pretty easily. I think that was a mistake and I should have just gone for it. I've been bitten in the past by doing it a little bit early, but I think if they had the extra creatures, they'd probably be putting them out to defend against multiple Marauders anyway, so I just think that was a bit of an oversight on my part. Game 3 here, we get another pretty nice hand though, Carrion Feeder and Vampire, 3 nice pieces of interaction, and I believe I brought the Shambling Ghast back into the deck, if I didn't already have them, to pick off Standard Bearers, but we're going to start with a Feeder so we can get the ball rolling as quickly as possible. Abundant Growth. We get a Swamp, so I have the choice of playing a Vampire, having 2 attackers, or just going all in on this Feeder right away. I guess I choose neither. I just sack once so that I have the Mercenary to pump the Shambler for next turn, but I am going for the consistent damage with the Feeder. They kept another 1-lander, so just a Scout isn't going to cut it, and we get a Beetle, which is a fantastic draw. Play that, play a Vampire, or actually we decide to play the Shambling Ghast. Attack. This way I can sack the Ghast and still play the Vampire. So we get the extra counter on the Beetle and the Feeder this turn, and we hit for 5. If I sacked the Shambler there to the Feeder, we'd actually be losing damage unless I sacked more of the Squirrels. I don't necessarily want to be priced into that because then the Vampire will get worse. But down to 13, now we have a Vampire that can be 11 damage at the moment. If we get any other creature, it can be lethal. Beater plus Feeder is definitely lethal, so there's going to need to be a chump block or 2. And they have a Mask of Law and Grace, which does get protection from black. That can be a free chump block. But, especially with a stamina growing something just by 2, they would need to be able to block 2 of these growers to survive. So block the Vampire, and we're going to be able to easily sacrifice the Mercenary, the Squirrel, the other Squirrel, or just even hit with the Squirrel and deal 13 damage. So we're able to take down match 3 against Bogles. Round 4 here, we have not a bad hand. On the draw, Village Rites, Double Shambler, Bloodthrone Vampire, so we want a stamina pretty bad. 3rd land is not great. 4th land is even worse. But we start with the Nested Shambler. See how things are going. We are against Terror, which is one of our favored matchups, so ideally that helps. Delver does not blind flip, which is great for us. Ponder to set it up for next turn. Play an island and pass the turn. We get another Village Rites. So we attack in for 1 with the Shambler and play a Bloodthrone Vampire, hoping it doesn't get Force Spiked, but I really want to get it down since we don't have a lot else going for us. They Thought Scour us so that they don't mess up their Delver flip. On a mental note, they swing for 3 and pass the turn. We get another Swamp, and I don't really want to play into counter spells here. I think we're attacking for 2 and just leaving up Village Rites, both of them. Well, we decided to go for the Shambler. If they do counter this, then I can maybe get a Village Rites off. Also, it's the first spell we're casting, which means if they counter this, maybe they let through a beetle or a feeder or something, like as far as they're concerned. So they decide not to counter it. Maybe they don't have one, but they mental note to hit 2 more Thought Scours, so that's 5 spells in grave. They Sleep of the Dead the vampire. Definitely a bit annoying. Play an island and swing for 3 and pass the turn. I decided to go for a Village Rites. If they counter this, maybe they'll tap out a little bit for our next turn. Of course, if they have the Dispel or Spell Pierce, which they do, maybe this doesn't do as much as I'd like, but might as well do the second Village Rites here. If they fear tapping out, we can maybe get them. They have the second Dispel, so that's really unfortunate. And also, we don't actually have much to follow up with. So we play Carrion Feeder. Don't get a lot from that. Unfortunately, with the Dispels, we probably were never getting those Village Rites off. So that was probably just destined to be that way. They swing with the Aberration for 3 damage. And we get another Carrion Feeder. Really awkward draws here. We're going to cast it, but not really doing it for us. We swing with the team, decide to sack the second Feeder to the first one to try to get in any sizable amount of damage. Technically, this makes us winning the race now because we have 4 damage to their 3, which gives us a 3-turn clock and them a 4-turn clock. However, they have a Sleep of the Dead in the graveyard. They have more cards than us. They swing for 3. Flashback the Sleep of the Dead on the Carrion Feeder this time, which makes sense if they have any way to protect against the vampire. Like if we had a stamina here and they didn't have a counterspell, then the vampire is actually the one that's going to be lethal. However, they have a counterspell for our Infestation Sage. If our last card we'd been sandbagging was a Supernatural Stamina, that would be really sick. We could get there. But obviously not. They go for a Ponder and swing with the Aberration. They cast a Terror, play an island, and now they have Sleep of the Dead from the yard on the vampire. We get a Sadistic Glee, but that's not really going to do enough. If I put it on the Feeder, I could make the Feeder an 8/8 by sacking the vampire, the Nested Shambler, and the Squirrel. But I figure if I put it on the Feeder, they might just be tempted to block with the Terror just to make sure, because if we had any instant speed creature and they don't block, then they could just die. So I figure we throw it on the Feeder, attack, and hope for the best. If they do block, I can eat their Terror. They can attack us with the Aberration, but then I might be able to get lethal on them next turn. Of course, they could Sleep of the Dead the Feeder, but if they don't Sleep of the Dead both the Feeder and the vampire, then they could be okay. They Spell Pierce. Obviously, that doesn't really matter. They only have enough cards in their graveyard for Sleep of the Dead once, except with the Terror, the Spell Pierce that they just put in there, and if they block with the Terror and it dies, that's going to be enough to sleep both the Feeder and the vampire. And we do attack with just the Feeder. This also lets us have a chump blocker for the Terror if they attacked back without blocking. They do block, but now I can eat the Terror, but if they sleep both of our creatures, there's no card we can really draw that's going to win us the game here. Rite of Consumption would only deal 9. They attack for 3. They cast a Cryptic Serpent, though, and they sleep the Feeder. So, I mean, Rite of Consumption could deal 9, but that's it. And we get a Swamp, so it does not end up mattering. Unfortunate. It was a little closer than it looked, but Sleep of the Dead, really good card. Here we get a bunch of Graveyard Hate, more creature removal, and Mesmeric Fiend from the sideboard. A couple of those. And we get just a terrible hand to start. Nothing going for it. Definitely an easy mull. And a hand that looks pretty similar, but is actually okay. The difference being we have a vampire and a fiend. Unearth actually has a decent target now with the fiend or a link breaker. So we're going to keep this one and throw back a swamp. Play the link breaker. And they start with the Delver, which means we're going to be able to get our vampire down. We get a Rotten Reunion. Could be good later for a Sleep of the Dead or something like that. Attack for 1, and we play our vampire. They go for a Brainstorm in response to the Delver, which means they flip it on a mental note. Play another Delver. Obviously, that one could also be set up from the first Brainstorm. So this could be a pretty aggressive start for us. Pretty unfortunate. Delvers are definitely, like, we're favored in this matchup, but Delver is not one we have the best way of dealing with if I don't have a Snuff Out or something in hand right away. We get a Shambler. I could just go for a big Vampire, but I think I want a Fiend here. The next turn I can Unearth. Maybe Shambler again. And we see 2 Serpents, Counterspell, Mental Note, Lorien revealed. So I could take the Counterspell. They cycle the Lorien. Mental Note. They just have a couple terrors. We're not taking a serpent at all because obviously we're already dealing with the Delvers. So we end up taking the Lorien because we figure cutting them on mana could be good. And with the Unearth, it might be not too hard to play around the Counterspell. They flip another Mental Note off the Aberration, cast one of those, cast the other one, looking for a land here since we took their Lorien. Doesn't look like they found it. They attack for 6. Stamina off the top would just win us the game. That would be our best draw. We get a Link Breaker, so I could Link Breaker, Shambler. That's 6. I could attack for 13. And I realized if last turn I had Bloodthrone Vampire sacked the Link Breaker, I could have gotten in for 2 more damage. And then the Mercenary could pump the Nested Shambler, which would allow me to still get in for 13 this turn. So I could have had lethal this turn if I had just sacked the Link Breaker last turn, which I should have done. So a bit annoying here. I'm not going to make the same mistake. We are going to sack the Link Breaker, and we're even going to sack the Link Breaker we're attacking with. Hit for 5 and pass the turn. They have a Brainstorm. If they hit a land, they can hold up Counterspell, or they could cast a Serpent or something. They find a Sleep of the Dead for the Vampire. Really annoying. We have the Rotten Reunion for it, but unfortunately they have 6 damage in the air, so if we don't win this turn or find a way to kill one of their aberrations, we're going to lose next turn. And especially since we had the win, we just did not quite do our math. We didn't take the time to think that out. We even get a Spell Bomb to blow up their whole graveyard. That's not going to matter. The only way we have to draw a card here is cycling an Unearth or using a Spell Bomb. But then all I have is a Snuff Out for free. Snuff Out's not going to save us because it can kill 1, but it puts us to 1 life. So always really unfortunate when you realize that you made a kind of minor mistake that ended up costing you the game. That is what this deck does a lot, though. This deck is incredibly powerful, but definitely a little punishing for minor mistakes. Even just missing 2 damage can throw the whole game from you. So I take a couple minutes to try to figure out if there's any way I can get out of this. I crack the Spell Bomb anyway, we get a Link Breaker, and unfortunately that's going to be it. Round 5 here, we have a decent opening hand. Beetle, Sadistically, Vampire, Shambling Ghast. Not a lot of interaction, although we have the -1/-1, which could be relevant. But a lot of aggression if we start with Beetle, Vampire, Sadistically. Now, of course, do we start with the Beetle? Could be tough if we're against an opponent where they could just kill our Beetle. But they start with the Llanowar Elves, so it looks like we're against Elves. Going to be nice to start with a Beetle. Or I decide, since I'm on the draw, I might actually need to get the Ghast down first, because then I could play a Bloodthorn Vampire and pick off like a Priest of Titania if they play that right here. Instead, they Winding Way, revealing Quarian, Hydra, Avenging Hunter. They do have a Quarian Ranger. They bounced the same forest they had, so it feels like maybe picking that off puts them on just 3 mana. And currently they have 5, which could get them a Hunter down. So I decide I don't want to sack and waste the counter from the Beetle, so I'm going to cast the Beetle first, Village Rites to pick off the Ranger. This means we're a little bit slower for the Vampire. Actually, I decided to go for the Elves. We don't know they have a second Forest in hand, so I feel like going for the Ranger would have been better, actually, right? Because now they could still have 1, 2, 3, 4 mana. Obviously, if I can kill both Elves, it'd be better this way, but also if they play a Priest or something, it's worse. 3. Yeah, I'm not really sure why I did that. I'm pretty sure I had a reason because I counted it out, but I think from what I'm looking at now, it would have made sense to kill the Ranger, but in any case, we are keeping them off the Hunter, which is the important part. They go for a Winding Way, find just a Fyndhorn Elves, which is pretty nice. Binning 2, lead the Stampedes, and a Forest. Play those Elves. We get another Village Rites. So I decided to just play a Vampire, get that going, and play a Shambler. This way I can attack with the Beetle. There's not really much they can do about it. I'm not going to sack anything here because I'd rather wait for the Sadistic Glee and also a turn when the Vampire's attacking. But Sadistic Glee with the Vampire and the Beetle means we get +4/+4 for everything we sacrifice. So next turn with the Shambler and Vampire, that could be +12. If we deal 2 here, they're at 17, plus the 3 we already have on board. It could be 15, so if I could find any other 1-mana creature, I could present lethal. Supernatural Stamina obviously gives us far beyond lethal. Use the Quarian Ranger here to get a Generous Ent, which is a 6-drop. If I'd killed the Quarian Ranger and they just had a Llanowar Elves, they would have only had a 5-drop, and playing a Hunter here looks bad for them. So yeah, I definitely made a mistake there. Again, I thought it out pretty carefully, and I just don't know why I landed on the one I did. But now I'm trying to figure out how can I still get in an attack here and force the Generous Ent to chump. A Vampire sacking Shambler, Vampire's already going to be a 7/7. So if I put the Sadistic Glee on the Beetle, it's going to also grow by 2 for every creature we sacrifice, so both of them will be able to attack. But I also realized that I could just get the Glee really big, and if I can get just like one more double body creature here, then I can actually attack with the Beetle, which is growing, and the Vampire, which is growing way bigger, and I want to play into a Rite of Consumption. So if I can find a Rite of Consumption, this Vampire is just going to go crazy. We actually find 2 more double body creatures, so now I can attack with impunity here. They have to block the Vampire because it's far and away lethal. Sacking just our 5 fodder creatures here would give it +15/+15, plus the Beetle will be an 8/8. So they have to chump something. They could chump with a Ranger or untap on Elves, or lose the Generous Ent. And they decide to block the Quarian Ranger on the Vampire, the Ent on the Beetle. So we get to sacrifice 3 pieces of fodder here to make the Beetle big enough to eat the Ent, and we get a Quarian Ranger out of the deal. Pretty nice for us. Oh, not just 3 fodder. We have to sacrifice, 4 or 5 to get the Beetle big enough, but it's well worth it. We're going to leave the Insect around just in case they get the Avenging Hunter. We will have a flying creature to get over them. In case that's relevant, we'll also obviously have giant creatures to attack in. And since we ate a couple creatures, the Sadistic Glee creature grows. So now we have an 8/8 and a 7/7, both of which can get quite a bit bigger. They play another Ranger, and they cast a Nyxborn Hydra for +2/+2 on this Elf. So it has a blocker for the Insect. We get another Vampire, but we can just attack in with our 2 creatures, force 2 chump blocks, and then they're going to have to chump block 2 creatures next turn. Like, there's just no way they can really do this. I guess we only force 1 chump block, that's fair. They just block 1 here. Can't kill with the beetle, but now we'll be able to. Now the beetle and almost the vampire will be lethal next turn. The second vampire, that is. And they concede, definitely in a bit of a tough spot there. We bring in all of our board wipes and single target removal to wipe away their creatures. We get a 7-card hand with 7 spells, so that's not going to work. This one's okay, so we put back one of our vampires. We have no interaction, not the fastest hand either. Oh, we actually mulligan twice. Let's look at the other mulligan hand. Our first hand was, yes, so this was actually what I wanted to talk about specifically, because our first hand is 2 beetles, 2 feeders, Shambler, and Village Rites. I think this hand is generally the type of hand, obviously we'd want 2 lands to be perfect, but the type of hand that you want against elves. Beetle, Feeder is an incredible way to put up a lot of pressure super quickly. If I had a second land, I would have snap kept. But with just 1 land, even on the draw, if we don't find that second land, Elves is often a turn 4 win. Without any interaction, we can't really stop that. With a second land, or maybe even if this exact hand, but if we were on the play, I probably would have kept this because it can be really aggressive, but just not going to cut it here. So we end up going down to 5. Keep Vampire, Sage, Village Rites, not the best hand, still no interaction, and not as speedy as we'd like. They start with an Elvish Mystic, and we just get a Link Breaker. We're going to cast that. They play a Timberwatch Elf. If I can find a Snuff Out, that's not going to be too bad for us, but we get a Swamp. So I can just play a Vampire, or I could try to dig for the Snuff Out. We're going to attack for 1. There's no world where they block here. They'd be crazy to, because we could just have a Stamina, and that's an incredible trade for us. We play the Vampire. I figure I need to get the damage down. If I have a Snuff Out, the Timberwatch Elf isn't going to be that powerful this turn. It's going to be powerful like probably on a future turn once they have 1,000,000 mana. And they play another Quarian Ranger and attack with a Mystic. Obviously, they have a Timberwatch Elf up to buff, so we're not going to block here. And they do just get in for, what is that, 6 damage? Because they can untap the Elf with the Quarian Ranger, both of them on our turn to pump if we had like a Drowned Sorrow here. We get a Nested Shambler, so we got a Village Rites. Snuff Out's really our best draw. We get Sadistically Nested Shambler. That's a nice combo, but not looking the best here. We just put out a couple creatures. They Winding Way, and they just hit a Nyxborn Hydra. Unfortunately, that's exactly what they wanted. They tap the Priest a couple times with the Quarian Ranger, plus 12 to the Mystic with Trample, and it's easily going to kill us with the Timberwatch Elf, which can also pump it. We can't block enough. So go into game 3 here, and we keep, and we get this 7-card hand. A lot of really good things going on. Shambler, Stamina, Link Breaker, Beetle, Rite of Consumption, but we have no Carrion Feeder to make this more consistent, and we have no removal. Otherwise, the hand looked incredible, but we just can't afford to durdle in this match. And we get a really good hand here, Bloodthorn Vampire. It's a 1-lander, but Vampire, we have some Village Rites, double Beetle, Snuff Out. We got to keep the Snuff Out. Worst card, unfortunately, is our second Beetle, just because we really need fodder to sack to the Village Rites. We need the Vampire, we need a Beetle, so we got to get rid of the second one. I'm not going to Snuff Out an Elves, just a Llanowar, Fyndhorn, Elvish Mystic, unless we knew somehow that that was their only land. We're going to attack with the Link Breaker. We do draw the land, which is perfect for us, so I get to play the Vampire. Next turn I can play Beetle, Village Rites maybe. And they have the Timberwatch Elf, again on turn 2. Luckily the Snuff Out is going to make that not too much of a problem this time. Snuff it out right away. Attack for 2. Village Rites the Link Breaker. Try to draw something else. And we get a Shamligast, which is really, really good. Honestly, I could just pick off the Elves right here, and I do consider that, but there's enough creatures that are important enough to pick off, like Quarian Ranger and Priest of Titania, that the Shamligast can get, that I think it's probably better to just wait on it, especially because I'm not getting more damage since I've already attacked. And they cast a Wildling, or rather a Roost Seek, to find a forest. Play that, and play another Timberwatch Elf. Well, our last card is an Unearth, so I can Shamligast the Timberwatch, and then Unearth, bring it back, pick off the Elf, which not only deals with the Elf, but also with this Link Breaker. I believe that's just lethal. Sack the Gas twice, sack the Link Breaker twice in the Mercenary. That's plus 10, 15 with the Beetle, 18 damage all in. So we're going to do exactly that. Oh, also pump with the Mercenary token for an extra damage. So it is, in fact, going to be lethal. Unearth on the Ghast, and they scoop it up right there. All right, so the 6th and final round that I was able to play, we get a 7-spell hand. We're going to mulligan that. And then we get a pretty nice one here. as long as our interaction matters with Snuff Out and Shambling Ghast. We decided to keep it, but I put back the Snuff Out and just hoping that we're against a Red Madness or something like that, that the Snuff Out isn't as relevant. Not that this is an incredible hand against that, but just something that the Snuff Out we're not going to super want. We do start with the Shambling Ghast anyway. I can grow our Feeder and Beetle with the Ghast. And they play Island, so probably going to want that Snuff Out if we're against Terror or Fairies or anything like that. Another Carrion Feeder, not the best ever. We swing for 1 here, and then play a Feeder and then a Beetle. And I realize as I'm casting the Feeder that I should have reversed these, because if they have a Force Spike here, I'd prefer for the Feeder to have got countered because we have a second one. Of course, we have the Unearth either way, but still would have been better. And they do respond, but they cast a Mental Note, so not the end of the world. After all, they play an Island and just pass the turn. And now I'm probably not playing into Counterspell. I'm just attacking for 3 damage a turn. Well, that was one idea anyway. Apparently, I decided to just cast the Feeder. It's not necessarily the worst thing either. We do want to get damage going a little bit faster, is my thought process. And they don't counterspell, so I guess it worked out just fine. We sack the Shambling Ghast to grow, and I could also unearth here. Of course, if they did counter the Feeder, I could then unearth whatever. We just don't have the best unearth target, so I think it could have been fine to pass as well, but this way we're getting in for more damage every turn. So we're only giving them like 3 more turns. They have to find some interaction or some creatures. And they do have a Sleep of the Dead. That's going to slow us down a little bit. And a Shambler. That I think I'm just going to run out. If they want to counter it, then I can unearth it, which they do. And since it grows 2 of our creatures, obviously not the 2 that are attacking this turn, I think it's probably worth to just bring back. And I do want to diversify the damage a little bit here. Of course, if we end up sacrificing one of these feeders to the other one, then any counter on there is a bit of a waste, but they have a Sleep of the Dead in the graveyard, so we want to make sure we're diversifying so that we're not just dealing them, giving them one juicy target to tap down. We leave the Squirrel around in case we get a Village Rites or something like that. And they cast a Serpent tapping out. So like a Marauder would be a great draw, or a Snuff Out. Of course, we put one of those on the bottom. We get a Vampire. This allows us to, I just attack with everybody. I realize after this is not the best play, because now if I want to save this Beetle, I have to sack everything to save the Beetle. To trade with it, I still have to sacrifice like a Vampire and a Squirrel, and then that Serpent's trading for a lot. Not to mention all that we have left over after that is like 2 feeders, which are fighting for fodder, so I probably shouldn't have attacked with the Beetle this turn. But if I don't attack with the Beetle, I can't really attack with much at all. So I don't know. The attack is kind of rough, but I'm not really sure what else to do. If I just let this one Serpent hold back our entire board with the Sleep of the Dead, we could just be in trouble from there. But I end up sacrificing the Vampire and the Squirrel to our feeders, trading off. We have 2 3/3 feeders. They do go to 5, so now we just need to find, if they don't have a creature, they have to Sleep the Dead just to survive here, and then if we have any fodder, we can kill them. They do have a Terror for 3 mana, and we top deck a Rite of Consumption. They only have 1 mana up. Unless they play Envelop in their main deck, it's got to be like Spell Pierce, which we have mana for, or Dispel, which doesn't counter this. So I can attack with both. Whichever they block, I sacrifice to the other one, hit for 4, and then Rite of Consumption for the last 4. It worked out well, and I really don't know how the game would have gone if we didn't make that attack. So I honestly do think maybe it was right to have attacked with all those creatures last turn, but I should have at least considered how much I would have had to invest for the Beetle to trade, which I didn't at first. So we end up getting the game, which is nice. We, of course, bring in our more removal and such, and we get an incredible anti-terror hand. 2 Marauders, Stamina, Feeder, Beetle. They play a Delver, and I just definitely want to start with a Beetle here, because if I just play a Marauder on turn 2 to eat the Delver, then it's going to grow the Beetle. I'm not going to want to lose out on those counters. Of course, if they just leave up Counterspell here, maybe I won't end up doing that. And they do get a blind flip of Thought Scour. Pass the turn. We get another Swamp. I don't think playing a Mesmeric Fiend does much here. Carrion Feeder is very inefficient. I think we just go for the Marauder. If that gets countered, we just do another Marauder next turn. It doesn't get countered, so we actually get to eat the Delver and get a nice 3/3 Beetle that starts attacking. They Thought Scour themselves, hitting a couple spells, and Thought Scour again, hitting a Spell Pierce. So they could play a Cryptic Serpent here, which is going to work out perfectly for us with our Accursed Marauder. And we top deck an Unearth, which actually means I could unearth the Marauder from graveyard, but that's actually not as mana efficient, so let's just play the Carrion Feeder and the Marauder. Eat their guy. Now we have a 5/5 Beetle swinging in. Next turn I can Fiend to try to take a counterspell, unearth the Marauder if they play another creature. If I get a land, I could even Stamina the Marauder if they have 2 creatures. They play a Terror, 1 mana left, and we get a Swamp. So if I Mesmeric Fiend here and then Unearth, I guess if they have 2 Spell Pierces, it can be worse here, because then we can't Unearth through the Spell Pierce. So it's possible I should just Unearth the Marauder first, because we can't get Spell Pierced. But I decided to go for the Fiend Supernatural Stamina play. to take 2 cards from their hand. If they have a Spell Piercer Dispel, which they have here, they're going to use that. We still get to take a card from their hand. Now they're tapped out. This way, if they didn't have that, but they had Spell Pierce and they didn't use it, they would have had to have 3 Spell Pierces to get the Unearth that's coming later. They turn up Dispel, Mystic, and Terror. I take the Mystic because that card's really scary, but they're on 3 mana. That was definitely not the scariest card to take there. I probably should have just taken the Terror because we don't actually have a way to deal with it at this point. That said, we do get in for 10 here. Even with the Terror, we have a Lethal Beetle they're going to have to chump. But if they drew an island and played a Mystic and had nothing else, that would not have been a big deal. So I played this game, I think, pretty well, although I had a lot of cards handed to me, but definitely should not have taken the Mystic with the Fiend. But in any case, we're able to get there anyway. So that's a nice 4-2. It was really sad having to abandon the Super Qualifier after this. But I had a lovely comedy show to go to with some family. So as always, this is the stock list that I love so much. It just always serves me really well. I'm able to do pretty well in challenges, super qualifiers, and things like that with it. And if you're interested in learning more about the deck, there is a full sideboard guide that I made in the link in the description below that you can get for $15. If you buy it now, you'll have it with all of the updates for the rest of time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.